The sterile white walls of Galactic News Network's premier studio gleamed under harsh lighting as veteran war correspondent Zara Vex adjusted her neural implant and smiled at the camera with practiced enthusiasm. Across from her sat what could only be described as 4 arms worth of military disappointment. General Krex Bombardon, legendary commander of the 3rd Galactic Fleet, looked like someone had taken a rhinoceros, given it opposable thumbs on all 4 hands, dressed it in medals, and then told it that its retirement fund had been invested in human cryptocurrency. His massive frame filled the reinforced interview chair, and his 2 sets of arms were crossed in what body language experts would later describe as quadruple defensive posturing. "Good evening, sentient beings across the galaxy," Zara chirped, her tail swishing with barely contained excitement. "I'm Zara Vex, and tonight we have an exclusive interview with General Krex Bombardon, the most decorated military commander in galactic history. General, thank you for finally agreeing to speak with us." Bombardon's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep irritation among his species. "Let's get one thing straight. Vex, I'm only here because High Command threatened to make me teach military strategy to first-year cadets if I didn't do this interview. And after what I've experienced, I'd rather face 1,000 human armies than explain basic tactics to teenagers." Zara leaned forward, her professional smile widening. "Speaking of humans, you've had quite a few encounters with them recently. 3 major defeats in the past year alone. That must be frustrating for someone with your track record." "Frustrating?" Bombardon's laugh sounded like gravel being fed through a wood chipper. "Lady, I've conquered 17 different species, subjugated 43 star systems, and never lost a single engagement in 30 years of service. Then these primates show up with their opposable thumbs and their complete disregard for the laws of physics, and suddenly I'm the galaxy's biggest joke." Now, General. I'm sure our viewers would love to hear about your first encounter with human forces. Take us back to where it all began." Bombardon's expression shifted from annoyed to haunted. Alien 7. Mining planet. Should have been a routine pacification mission. He paused, all 4 hands clenching simultaneously. "I should have known something was wrong when our intelligence reports kept mentioning something called Yee-Haw tactics." "Picture this," Bombardon began, his voice taking on the tone of someone recounting a recurring nightmare. "Alien 7. A simple mining operation that had declared independence from the Galactic Federation. Standard procedure: show overwhelming force, demand surrender, collect taxes. I brought 200 ships, 50,000 troops, and enough firepower to crack a moon. The human settlement had maybe 3,000 colonists and some industrial equipment." He gestured with all 4 arms simultaneously, a sight that would have been impressive if it weren't so desperate. My tactical computers calculated a 99.7% probability of victory within 6 hours. The remaining 0.3% was reserved for unexpected solar flares or acts of cosmic entities. Nowhere in our projections did we account for humans turning a mineral processing plant into a weapon of mass destruction. Zara's ears perked up with interest. "How exactly does one weaponize a mining facility?" "That's what I'd been asking myself for months," Bombardon growled. "Their commanding officer, some lunatic named Captain Buck Rawlings, apparently looked at our invasion fleet and said, and I quote from our intercepted communications, 'Hold my beer and watch this.' What followed was the most ridiculous display of improvised warfare I've ever witnessed." The general's eyes went distant as he relived the memory. "First, they redirected their ore transport rails to launch chunks of raw titanium at our landing craft. Not missiles, mind you. Literal chunks of rock accelerated to near light speed using equipment designed to move mining carts. And while we were dealing with that nonsense, they somehow rigged their atmospheric processes to create localized tornadoes on a planet with no natural weather patterns. That sounds tactically sound, if unconventional," Zara offered. "Oh, we hadn't even gotten to the unconventional part yet," Bombardon continued, his voice rising. "While half my fleet was dodging flying rocks and artificial hurricanes, Captain Rawlings and his team had apparently been watching something called action movies and decided that the best way to fight a space battle was to surf on pieces of debris while shooting rocket launchers. I watched through my command screen as human soldiers literally rode chunks of exploded spaceship through zero gravity, whooping like they were at some kind of recreational facility. The general paused to collect himself, all four hands now rubbing his temple in a complex massage pattern. The final insult came when they somehow convinced our own automated defense systems to switch sides. Rawlings had walked up to our quantum encryption barrier, pulled out what appeared to be a standard mining tool, and started percussive maintenance. 20 minutes later, our shields were not only down, they were actively protecting the human settlement while targeting our own forces. How is that even possible? Zara asked, genuinely bewildered. That's exactly what I demanded to know during the surrender negotiations. Rawlings just shrugged and said, sometimes you got to turn it off and turn it back on again, but harder. When I asked him to explain his strategy, he told me he didn't have one. He was just winging it and hoping for the best. That's when I realized we weren't fighting a military force. We were fighting weaponized chaos. After Xerion 7, I thought I understood what we were dealing with. Bombardon continued, his voice taking on the weary tone of someone who had learned better through painful experience. I spent months studying human military history, trying to find patterns, logic, some kind of method to their madness. What I discovered was that humans don't just break conventional military doctrine. They seem to take it as a personal challenge to do the exact opposite of whatever makes strategic sense. Zara shuffled through her notes. You faced them again at Nebula Station, correct? The Battle of Nebula Station. Bombardon said the words like they physically hurt. I came prepared this time. Studied every human conflict in their databases. Anticipated their improvisation, their unconventional thinking. I had contingency plans for contingency plans. You saw. Opprobet. What I didn't account for was their complete disregard for the concept of self-preservation. He held up one hand, counting off fingers. Standard military doctrine states that spaceships are valuable resources to be protected. Humans treat them like disposable ammunition. Our intelligence had identified their fleet commander, a woman named Lieutenant Vera Crash. Yes, that was actually her name. And yes, it should have been a warning sign. What happened? Happened. She rammed our flagship with her entire squadron, Bombardon stated flatly. Not in a desperate last stand. Not as a noble sacrifice. She did it in the opening minutes of the battle because, and I quote from her final transmission, it seemed like it would be awesome. Her pilots were cheering as they turned their ships into guided missiles. The general's four eyes seemed to glaze over as he continued. But here's the truly insane part. It worked. Not only did they cripple our command vessel, but the debris field they created somehow formed a perfect maze that channeled our remaining ships directly into their prepared killing zones. When I asked our tactical computers to analyze the pattern, they concluded that creating such a formation through deliberate ramming would require calculating 17,000 variables simultaneously. Lieutenant Crash's response when we questioned her about it: math is hard. Explosions are easy. Zara leaned forward. What about the siege of fortified world Gamma? Ah yes, where humans somehow convinced an entire planet's ecosystem to join their rebellion. Bombardon's laugh held no humor. Gamma was our most secure military installation. Impenetrable shields, automated defenses, a garrison of 100,000 troops. The human force numbered less than 500. Any rational assessment would conclude that siege was impossible. He gestured expansively with all four arms. So naturally, the humans ignored the fortress entirely and spent 3 weeks making friends with the local wildlife. When we finally ventured outside to see what they were up to, we discovered they had taught the indigenous six-legged bears to operate heavy artillery and somehow convinced the flying razorfish to form attack squadrons. The planet's carnivorous plants had been trained to distinguish between human and galactic uniforms. That's impossible, Zara protested. That's what I kept saying. Bombardon agreed grimly, right up until a flock of weaponized parrots started dive-bombing our communication arrays while chanting human military cadences. The siege ended when their commander, some maniac called Sergeant Major Bulldozer, rode a domesticated land shark through our front gate while the local ecosystem provided covering fire. Our surrender was accepted by a committee consisting of 2 humans and a very polite bear wearing a military helmet. Bombardon's 4 hands clenched simultaneously as he approached what was clearly the most painful memory. The Battle of Titanium Ridge was supposed to be my redemption. High Command gave me everything: the entire 5th Fleet, 200,000 troops, quantum artillery, reality-bending weapons that technically shouldn't exist, and authorization to use tactics that are banned by 17 different galactic conventions. Surely that was enough firepower to handle a human force, Zara suggested hopefully. You'd think so, wouldn't you? Bombardon's laugh was bitter. I had studied every human battle, catalogued their impossible tactics, prepared for every conceivable form of chaos they might unleash. I brought enough firepower to sterilize 3-star systems. The human force consisted of exactly 47 individuals led by Commander Jake Bulldozer, Sergeant Major Bulldozer's apparently unrelated colleague. The general stood up and began pacing, all 4 arms gesticulating wildly. I had them surrounded, outgunned, and completely cut off from any possible reinforcement. My victory was mathematically guaranteed. That's when Commander Bulldozer contacted us on an open frequency and said, "Hey there, space folks. You all look pretty serious. Want to see something cool?" "What did he show you?" "A roll of duct tape," Bombardon said with the tone of someone announcing the end of civilization. "Standard issue, civilian-grade, adhesive tape." Then he held up what appeared to be a kitchen utensil. "A spatula, I believe it's called." He said, "We've been doing some redecorating while you all were setting up your fancy formation. I hope you don't mind." The general sat back down heavily. That's when we discovered that, during the 3 days I had spent positioning my fleet for maximum tactical advantage, the humans had somehow infiltrated every single one of our vessels and made what they called improvements. They had used duct tape and various kitchen implements to reprogram our weapon systems, recalibrate our shields, and restructure our tactical computers. How is that even remotely possible? Apparently, according to human engineering philosophy, any problem can be solved with sufficient application of adhesive tape and creative profanity, Bombardon explained with the voice of a broken man. They had turned our quantum cannons into what they called super soakers, modified our shields to project holographic images of embarrassing moments from my childhood, and programmed our navigation systems to play something called country music at maximum volume. He buried his face in all 4 hands. The final battle lasted 6 minutes, not because we were defeated quickly, but because we spent the first 5 minutes trying to figure out why our weapons were shooting rainbow-colored energy beams while our speakers blasted songs about tractors and heartbreak. By the time we realized what had happened, the humans had somehow used our own quantum artillery to create a localized space-time anomaly that transported our entire fleet to a peaceful meditation dimension where violence is physically impossible. And Commander Bulldozer sent us a fruit basket with an apology note for any inconvenience caused, Bombardon whispered. The note also included detailed instructions for escaping the meditation dimension, along with a recipe for something called sweet tea and an invitation to a barbecue once the war was over. "You want to know the real truth?" Bombardon asked, his voice taking on the exhausted tone of someone who had finally reached acceptance. "It's not that humans are militarily superior. They're not stronger, faster, or more intelligent than any of the species I've successfully conquered. Their technology is primitive compared to ours, their tactics are nonsensical, and their strategic planning consists primarily of variations on, 'let's see what happens.'" Zara waited patiently as the general collected his thoughts. "The problem is that they're completely unpredictable because they don't think like any rational military force should," Bombardon continued. "Every other species in the galaxy follows logical patterns. We study terrain, calculate supply lines, analyze enemy weaknesses, and develop strategies based on proven tactical doctrines. Humans look at an impossible situation and treat it like an interesting puzzle to solve with whatever happens to be lying around." He held up one finger from each hand, counting off points. "They don't see obstacles. They see opportunities. They don't follow rules because they assume all rules are suggestions. They don't fear death because they're too busy being excited about whether their ridiculous plan will work. And somehow, impossibly, their plans always work because the universe itself seems to bend around their sheer, bloody-minded optimism. But surely there must be some method to counter their tactics. Bombardon shook his head sadly. The Galactic Military Academy has created an entire department dedicated to studying human warfare. Professor Quelox, our most brilliant strategic mind, spent 2 years analyzing human military history and concluded that humans win battles by accident so consistently that it might actually be a superpower. His final report was just 3 words. They're not serious. The general leaned forward conspiratorially. You want to know what really broke me? After the Battle of Titanium Ridge, I received a personal communication from Commander Bulldozer. I expected threats, gloating demands for surrender. Instead, he asked if I was okay and whether my troops needed medical attention. When I told him he had just destroyed the most powerful military force in galactic history, he seemed genuinely surprised and apologized for getting carried away. He apologized? Profusely. Bombardon confirmed. Then he invited me to something called a victory barbecue, where apparently both sides were welcome to attend and discuss the battle over grilled meat and recreational beverages. When I pointed out that we were supposed to be enemies, he said, "Well, yeah, but the war's over now." Right. No point holding grudges. I've conquered entire civilizations that held grudges for centuries. These humans treat galactic warfare like a sporting event where everyone goes out for drinks afterward. Bombardon stood up again, his movements heavy with defeat. That's when I realized we were never fighting a war. We were participating in some elaborate human recreational activity that we fundamentally misunderstood. They're not trying to conquer the galaxy. They're just trying to make friends in the most explosively complicated way possible. Somehow, it works. So what's next for General Krex Bombardon? Zara asked as the interview began to wind down. Retirement, Bombardon announced firmly. I'm opening a meditation retreat on the peaceful moon of Serenity 7. No weapons, no tactics, no strategic planning, just quiet contemplation and possibly some gardening. I've had enough excitement to last several lifetimes. Zara smiled for the camera. And there you have it, beings of the galaxy. The legendary General Bombardon, finally at peace with his defeats. Before we sign off, General, any final thoughts on humanity's place in the galactic community? Bombardon considered the question seriously. If you ever encounter human military forces, don't fight them. Invite them over for dinner instead. You'll save yourself a lot of confusion, and apparently they make excellent barbecue. Plus, they'll probably fix whatever's wrong with your spaceship using kitchen utensils and enthusiasm. Wise words from a seasoned warrior, Zara concluded. This has been Galactic News Network, and I'm Zara Vex. Good night, and remember, citizens of the galaxy, if humans offer to help with your military problems, just say yes and hide the duct tape. As the cameras stopped rolling, an assistant rushed onto the set with breaking news. MS Vex, we're getting reports that 3 more galactic generals have requested similar interviews after suffering defeats by human forces. Apparently, General Throke was beaten by a single human teenager who challenged him to something called a dance battle. And General Zephyr's entire fleet was defeated by a human grandmother who somehow convinced them that they were violating intergalactic noise ordinances. Bombardon groaned and buried his face in all 4 hands. It's spreading. In a small bar on the edge of galactic space, Commander Jake Bulldozer raised his beer and grinned at his companions. Did we all catch that interview? That general seemed like a nice fella. Maybe we should invite him to the next barbecue. Sergeant Major Bulldozer nodded thoughtfully. Good idea. We could teach him how to play horseshoes. I bet he'd be great at it with all those arms. Captain Buck Rawlings looked up from the mechanical contraption he was building out of drink stirrers and napkins. Speaking of which, I'd been thinking about that invitation to join the Galactic Defense Force. Sounds like fun. Think they'd let us bring our own equipment? Lieutenant Vera Crash grinned wickedly. Only one way to find out. But first, let's see if this jukebox can fly. Outside the bar, 3 more galactic fleets were quietly changing course, having intercepted the conversation. Some lessons. apparently didn't need to be learned the hard way.